Aloha, fellow literary beings. Dr. Dreaming Bear here with you on this beautiful day of coexistence in this poem of life. I thought I'd take a few moments to describe how Literati began and where I see it going, and what I've discovered after over 200 episodes of sitting with great thinkers, influencers across time who have had an impact on how humanity thinks and feels in today's world. People from every culture, every race, every religion, every sex represented in thought. And the discoveries that I've made have been profound in my life. In retrospect, it all began with a dream when I was a sophomore in college at Point Loma Nazarene University in San Diego, a beautiful 90-acre on the ocean school that was formerly a theosophical society. And so all the buildings were in these beautiful sacred geometry designs. In this dream, I was walking through a valley with a bunch of people, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people walking through this valley in one direction. And the old lady in front of me turns around and she has a pen in her hand, like a kind of pen you would think of as old with a feather coming out of it. And she says to me, "A poet or a man be, but don't take all day." And I understand from that she's saying, take this pen and become a poet, or keep walking down this valley along with everyone else. So I grabbed the pen, and immediately the old lady and everyone else in the valley around me disappeared. And to my bewilderment, I saw standing off to the side of the mountain Walt Whitman, a younger version, wearing a straw cap with a big long piece of straw coming out of his mouth, and he said, "Follow me." And so I started following Walt Whitman up these switchbacks that led up to the top of the mountain. And once we got to the top of the mountain, I could see that there were hundreds of other beings in lotus position hovering around a turquoise blue flame, which reached like 200 feet into the sky. Whitman guided me to an open space and said, "Go ahead and take your place." And as I watched, he jumped up into lotus position and began hovering in circle along with these other great beings who were all my favorite authors. Thoreau, Emerson, Twain, Dickinson, Neruda, Poe. They were all there along with hundreds of other beings. And once I jumped up into the lotus position, I sort of locked into a frequency with these people, and I could hear their words, but in my own voice going through my head. And I could even hear my own poetry being spoken by them. And I began to understand the cauldron of poesy, this place where all truth becomes singular, shared, a unified whole. It's hard to describe what it was like to be in that transcendent state with all these other beings and be sharing the same truths. After a while of being in that transcendent state, I felt a tugging at my shirt sleeve, and I looked down from my hovering position to see that it was Walt Whitman again saying, "The living aren't permitted to stay here, but if you choose this path of a poet and you continue on it, this is where you'll one day end up." And then he led me back down the switchbacks, down to that valley, and before he left, he handed me that pen that the old lady had given me. And I awoke from the dream, but essentially the lesson learned from the dream was that I was being called into the poetic life. So I accepted that invitation and began in earnest to seek out what I thought were scriptures of various sorts, because the sacred was so evident in that experience. But after doing 200 episodes of Literati, what I've discovered is a scripture that transcends all religions, embedded in the human experience, and a sacred understanding of our ancestors, which if we just tap into, becomes a profound awakening within us. And so I issue now the Literati challenge to all beings willing to experience this paradigmatic shift, magic, if you will. I invite you to begin listening to Literati series, of which there are 200 episodes now, and of which there will be 365 in total. Just start with whichever one you want to by going to the Literati playlist. Listen to one influencer per day. And just in your morning, begin by listening to this being and what they have to say, and then ponder it throughout your day. Allow yourself to take on the paradigmatic shift. And at the end of the cycle, if you do this once a day, every day, you'll begin to experience what I experienced in that dream space. The sacred embedded scripture of humanity happening across all time, across all cultures, across all paradigms. And it transcends all religious thought because it is a representative of the human essence as a whole and the feelings that we share, which are universal. Thank you from the heart for hearing what I have to say. I hope you take up the challenge. And if you do, I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out at any time.